Support for 100 Watts and a Wire is brought to you by 100wattsandawire.com. To subscribe to the show, simply click the RSS feed or subscribe wherever you get your podcast. When you visit, apply for your free 100 Watts ID and learn how you can become a sustaining member. Click the donate page and pick the option that works best for you. We've got a traveling toolkit, 100 Watts and a Wire gear, and activity days with prizes. That's 100wattsandawire.com. And ICOM. Get out and get active with ICOM's new IC705 and its optional multifunction backpack. And LDG. An LDG automatic tuner between your transmitter and antenna will match impedances and ensure maximum power output while protecting your finals from damage due to reflected RF. To learn more, visit ldgelectronics.com.
And now, from Grid Square Echo Mike 48, this is 100 Watts and a Wire.
Brothers and sisters, welcome back. We are talking about Coax today, and Steve just said something that made my heart jump. And I thought I better start applying for a second job, maybe something part-time, working at the farm down the road. But I can't say that you're wrong. I've had this situation, and I've had it in other places in my another job where moisture has gotten into things related to audio and it causes corrosion and you can't contain the water. It is sad to hear from my mentor and Elmer that once this gets in there, and you really just hammered home something important to me, is wrapping these connectors up like there's no tomorrow, because this could really be an expense. And I know you said ideally you would replace it all. I mean, and hams are cheap. We're a bunch of cheap, some of them, you know. But
yeah, we're frugal. We want to do it on the economic side, and that's why we buy used cables, and it's like, oh yeah, it looks good, it tests good, But
we've got to be smarter then. If we're not going to spend the money, then buy the whatever tape that you like, the electrical tape, the 3M, whatever brand it is. I know you warn against some tape, and we can mention that too, but this would be a good transition point to wrapping up connectors and how to do that and why it's important. Now, you just hit me in the gut when you said, because I've got a run that might be 150 feet. I've got one from my box, my switcher, it goes from home here out about 100 feet. And then from there, we go out further for 160, which is, the leggy beauty that I love. And that's quite a run. And to think that I have potentially killed myself in the way of, financially, that's a big one, man. That's a big one. If you ruin that one over $3 tape, let's talk about tape a little bit and how we can protect, because we can take your questions again. If you want to drop them in the chat, that would be absolutely fine. But now we kind of know that, this each foot could be $1. It could be a little less. It depends on what you use, depends on your situation. I did have a question about what you said, and then we'll get to the tape. When you sort of retire your Coax and you say, I think it's still good. Do you pick up another use for that? Do you put it back in service some other way?
Yeah, you could use it. So we can do some basic testing. So if you have 100 foot of cable, and we took it out of service out of our fixed station here, you can use it for portable operation. So let's take 100 feet of RG213/8. We know that based on the manufacturer's data sheet, and so if you went to ABR, you bought ABR cable. And that at 30 megahertz, it's 1 dB. We know that 1 dB of loss is approximately 20 watts. So you take your radio, you put a dummy load at the end of the coax, or better yet, put a dummy load at the end of your radio, you put your radio into the dummy load with a watt meter. You measure the power out. Okay, we're going to get 100 watts out of the radio set on CW. Perfect. Now we hook up the coax and we move the watt meter and dummy load to the end of the coax, and we measure it. And if it's around 80 watts, then we know the cable is in pretty good shape. You got decent connectors, and now you have, and then you have a useful piece of cable. And it's like, okay, wow, dang it, Steve, I could have done that, and you could do that out in your fixed station too. You can bring the cable down, put a dummy load on it, and check it, and go from there. But this cable is, say, 10 years old. It's like, do you really want to risk it? It's cheap insurance. You spent $1,000 on a radio. You spent a couple $100 on an antenna. What's another $100 in your coax, which you got 10 years out of it. It's $10 a year for that piece of coax. Now you have the coax. It can be backup, or you can use it in a portable operation when you go out with your club or go out and set up on field day. So,
is it silly to create like a ledger where you have made your maintenance? I mean, I'm starting to think like this now, because I remember the farmers, and my wife's grandfather was a farmer, and we found old ledgers on little pieces of, books like this. And it's like what the cost was when they, it was just sort of, these are pioneer type times, and maybe not quite that old, but that mentality of how much you spent, when did you do the upgrades? You know what I mean? Because I'm swapping in cable, or I'm changing out ropes, and maybe that seems like a lot, but I think when it comes to $1 a foot in some cases, and I use 213. Bob Heil was one of the early people in my ear back in those days, and he said that he uses 213, and it was just like, okay, he uses that. That's probably what I should look to invest in, and you can bury it and that sort of thing. So 213 has been what I use. It may not be what you need to use or want to use. It depends on where you are and what you're doing. But I've swapped out cables, and I couldn't tell you. Like, I know when I started on HF, but I couldn't tell you when I swapped out a new piece of 50-foot cable. And maybe that's a good idea to start thinking like, is that what you have to do in your professional life, Steve?
We sometimes will put a label on it, when it was installed, or for the most part, we use at work, we're using, Heliax, and so they last a lot longer. They're designed to be, long lasting, but, and we have an idea, but, ideally we should put the date it was put in service. And we've had cables that they were fine 20, 30 years down the road, especially 7/8 inch hard line. But occasionally we'll go up, we'll put a load on the end and we'll test it. Or we have a site analyzer. There's a, nice $20,000 piece of test equipment that we can sweep the antenna system. Yes. And it's basically a TDR, and then so we can look for faults in the cable, and which we have. And at times we run into something, and it's like, oh, time to replace that run, and go from there. But for us here, as the hobbyists, we want to look at 5-6 years and maybe check our connections and check our systems. Coax is overlooked, and it's.
Is it wrong when you say Heliax that I feel a certain way? Like I feel something happening in my body when you say Heliax, and it's really weird. I should probably just move to Kyle's question. Kyle's a friend of mine down the road here. He's a question for you, Steve. Interested to hear Steve's thoughts on what he uses for water blocking tape. Lots of choices out there and techniques for waterproofing. Great question, and a great time to probably go into that. AA0Z Kyle here in St. Louis. So go ahead, let's talk about tape.
Oh, that's an interesting one. So first off, don't go down to your local dollar store and get that $1 roll of vinyl black tape. Don't even think about it, because it will bite you in the butt down the road. So as you know, I'm here in the Pacific Northwest, and a lot of my work is done on what we call the wet side of the Cascade Mountain Range. So in the Seattle area, it's a very moist, it rains a lot. So what we do use pretty much in the professional world is we do a kind of a 3-step process. And the tape we use that I like to use is a Scotch brand. It's either 33, 88. Predominantly, I use a 37. That's what work buys, and that's what we get. So the difference between 33 tape and 88 tape is the thickness. It's measured in mils. 33 tape is like 7 mils, and 88 is like 8 mils. So it's just a little bit thicker. Typically we'll put down a layer of 37 tape, because that's what I use, is just over the connection. And we put it down pretty snugly. And the only reason we put it down there is because we're going to get back into this connector. It keeps the connector clean. Then over top of that first layer of tape, we use butyl, which is this sticky, nasty stuff. Once it warms up, it just gels, and it gets really just sticky. And if you put that on your connector directly, you're going to be hating life down the road when you have to open it up, because it sticks and it just becomes this gel. Not a gel, it's just this blob. And then we put layers. I put 3 layers of tape over the butyl. I have also used Scotch 23 tape, which is a rubberized self-vulcanizing tape, and that's what I use here at home. I still do my 3-step process. I put my first layer of black tape down, or 37, then I put the 23 tape, and then I put 2 or 3 layers of 37 over the self-vulcanizing tape. And but when I'm done, I layer it. Think of your roof and think of how the water is going to be coming down that cable. And I start from the bottom, go up, come back down. And then my last layer, I go up. So I start from the bottom and I layer, so that water just kind of sheets down off the connector. And then probably one of the most important things to do is peel off maybe about 6 to 12 inches of tape off your roll, cut it, and then let it go. Just let it sit there. The tape will kind of come back, retract, because when you're pulling on it, you're stretching it. That tape wants to come back to its natural state. Leave it there and then slowly wrap it around. Because if you wrap your connector and then you pull it tight and then cut it, over a course of time, that tape's going to start peeling back. And once the wind hits it, it's just going to unravel it. And now so put a tail out, let it dangle, and then slowly wrap it around your cable to finish it off. That's how I do it. I haven't had any water egress when I do it the right.
I think people are like, wow, like maybe I am. I can only speak for myself, but I'm thinking 3 layers of tape, man. And you know what I find? It's a knuckle buster because I've got a 5 switcher outside, 5 input switcher. And so getting into each particular one makes you like, this whole thing. When you say this, I'm like, oh man, because I'm having to do 2 inches at a time around these things because I can't get in. So I've got to get a better way of like taking them off, maybe numbering or lettering the coax, so you're not confused with 7, 8, 5 pieces of coax, and you're like, oh no, and then doing one at a time. I'm guilty of doing having 6 connected, 2 not connected, and then I'm trying to deal with it all at, that kind of deal at one time. But 3 layers of tape, that's pretty significant. But I'm not mad at you now because you've told me that once your kind of corrosion or water gets into your line, you could be done and the whole run could be done. And that's pretty significant information for me. I mean, I feel like I knew that, but I also feel like I've cut off a couple feet at a time to try to get to the good, coax that it wasn't? You want to show us something here? I'm going to go full screen with you, Steve. What you got?
So here's, you're talking about, so here's my entrance box going into my shack. This is what you want to use to do your, identify your cables. That's what we do in the professional world. We use color tape. And you just, so you just get these, just orange, blue, green, white. There's red, there's brown. You can also, if you have, just say 5 colors, you can put multiple colors. So you can have an orange, blue, orange, green, orange, blue. You can kind of color code your tapes. So this is coming out of the conduits from the antenna field, and then these are the jumpers that go into the house. And so I know that my blue line here is my tri-band antenna. My green line here is my 80-meter antenna. The orange is 40, but I had it hooked up onto this white RG8X, which was a test run. I was testing that homebrew off-center fed dipole that we showed. And then this is my normal 40-meter run. So I was just, messing around. So a great, a simple way of identifying cables is that I'm showing here. So
there's
so many different ways.
The show is like, are you confused about coax? And now I'm like, yeah, that's
more confused.
That's just you, dummy. You're the one.
No, we all get confused because there's so many different styles of coax. I mean, so let me reach down here. Mm-hmm. So let me bring up this. Here's 2 pieces of cable. And they all look the same. They just happen to have end connectors on them and just not UHF. But they're 2 different cables. They look the same. They're both 0.4 inches in diameter. One's a RG214, and the other one is RG8. So this one's RG8, and this one's RG214. They look the same, but they're 2 different cables. They're both 50 ohm cables, but the 214 is double shielded, and it's silver, and it's a mil spec. The difference is a lot more expensive. Mm-hmm. Would you use it to run out to your 80-meter dipole? No. Right. No, because it's somewhere I saw 214 was $7 a foot.
Good grief.
Yeah.
I bought some, they're 3 foot long. I had an idea I was going to do something. We'll save it for another day. And you talked earlier about bending the coax. Mm-hmm. And it's so stiff, kind of like what you have there. I think it's LMR 400, and it's about 3 foot of it. And I use it here in the shack, like coming through the window to my switch. And I'm thinking, well, it's a nice cable. It's short, and I've got it like looped around because I don't have it 3 feet. It would be here. So I have a little loop, but it's such a stiff cable. I don't know if it's necessary to have something that big, or I can have just a small, flimsy as a jumper. Can you talk for a minute or so about jumper cables and maybe talk about some of the bending that you mentioned before? Because I'm afraid it's so stiff that I don't want to. I know crimping it, I'm not trying to bend it back on itself, but just the turn makes me think, oh man, because there's some resistance there with that. And then maybe the second part of that is using smaller coax for jumpers and the plus and minus pros and cons of that.
I've used RG8X as, in fact, that's what I'm using between my 3000 and 1000 to the antenna switch. I have a remote antenna switch underneath the bench here, or the desk, and the in between the radio and the amplifier. So yes, you can use like 8X, which is great. It's nice and flexible. It's relatively small. It's easy to maneuver around because it's a short piece of run, and it's great for that. It can handle. So another thing I didn't bring up in the on the spreadsheet here, or this data sheet, is power handling capabilities. So if you look here, and we'll just go here with the 240, ABR 240, which is basically 8X. We can see at 10 meters, it can handle 1.24 kilowatts. But as we go higher in frequency and we get more loss, that power rating is reduced.
You're listening to 100 Watts and a Wire.
Desktop tuners are one of the most popular ham radio accessories. LDG has just come out with the Z100A desktop tuner, and it works with all modern HF radios like ICOM, Yaesu, Alinco, Kenwood, and more. The Z100A has LDG's famous 10-to-1 SWR tuning range that matches dipoles, verticals, end-fed long wires, G5RVs, or even an off-center fed Windom. Easy integration means plug-and-play operation. Installation could not be simpler. The Z100A's tuner goes everywhere with your HF radio. Desktop, portable, parks, islands, or tall summits. LDG is a family-owned and operated company dedicated to bringing advanced, quality products to the amateur market. Our focus is anticipating our customers' needs and providing them with world-class support. Don't forget, LDG products carry a full 2-year, fully transferable warranty. Support is only a phone call or email away. We're always here to help you. LDG Electronics, everywhere you look, there's an LDG. And ABR Industries. Struggling to find the right coax for your equipment? ABR Industries can help you find the right solution that won't break your piggy bank. We offer professionally terminated assemblies using high-quality PL259, N-type, SMA, BNC, and many other connectors. Custom lengths and specialized labeling is available too. All products are individually tested, and most orders ship within 1 to 2 days. For more information, visit abrind.com or call 713-492-2722.
Little pistols and big guns. This is 100 Watts and a Wire.
For 100 watts, no problem. If we're using it as a jumper, great, short run. For running 1,500 watts, let's see, 1,200 watts at 10 meters, we could probably get legal limit, say at 40 meters, but we're pushing it. That cable is going to probably start getting warmed up. But fortunately for our duty cycle with the voice and even CW, we're not going to really exceed the cable, but I wouldn't. I've done it. I've ran 8X full legal limit for a while and on 40 meters, and I know I was pushing the envelope. But right here, and this is a great thing, and ABR does it. I haven't seen it with any other manufacturers. They have a suggested, let me move this window. Jeez, move that out of the way. They have some suggested runs up to, and for 8X, they say no more than 100 feet they recommend. But here for the LMR 400 and 213, they say 500 feet. Now, you wouldn't do 500 feet at UHF. Look down here at LMR 400, 3.3 dB. So for a UHF run of LMR 400, you're losing more than half your power just going from the radio to the antenna. Now, we can overcome that by, if you had a 3 dB gain antenna, now you're back to parity. So whatever you put in the cable, you're radiating out on effective radiated power. That's a whole nother subject. We're not going to get into that. So you got to look at your applications. 150 megahertz is 2 meters. They list 220, and then 450 is our UHF 440 band. So you could see, and this is where Heliax comes into play. Is right up here. So Heliax. I'll just break it down. If you're going to be running Heliax, expect to spend some dollars. I just looked up. What was it? So 7/8 inch Heliax is about $5 a foot. Good. And then a 1/2 inch Heliax is about, say, $2.50. dollars. Now, it'll be more or less. It depends where you get it from and stuff like that. So it's
let's just say, because we're going to wrap up and let people get on with their day, because they have so much antenna work now to think about and do. But if we can put, I know I do. I'm getting a little neuroses about like my cables and stuff, and I wish I could reach it. It's like 5 feet from me, but I'd knock some things over just to show you the bendable, the cable. It comes to you in a package and it looks like a U, and I'm real sensitive with how I handle it. But Heliax came to me several years ago out there in Dayton, back at Hera Arena, out there in the mud and the flea market, which I love the most. And somebody said, "Yeah, that's Heliax," and I was like, "What is Heliax?" And it was, can you describe it in like a minute or so? It's the
shield of Heliax is a solid core of copper. So it's kind of corrugated, and the original hardline was just a smooth wall. And then Heliax came along, and it's kind of this corrugated and allows for ease of bend. But there's a minimum bend radius on Heliax because the center conductor or the dielectric of Heliax is in two forms. It's either air dielectric with a kind of the spacer that runs that keeps the center conductor centered within the shield, or most of the time it's a foam dielectric. And when you start to bend it, you're now putting stresses on the shield, and then the center conductor can then come in and get closer to the wall and the inside radius. I mean, it really gets it gets a little wild. I'll have to bring a couple of pieces of Heliax and open it up and show it to you. But we have to be mindful of the minimum bend radius. And the data sheets on Heliax will give you that. So I think 1/2 inch is like, we try to keep it within like 6-inch bend radius just to maintain the integrity. So you bend it too much, you put a kink in the cable, that becomes an impedance bump, that becomes a loss, it becomes a problem in the feed line, and now it's like, oh crud, we got to replace the run. And you can splice into it and all this other stuff, but every time you put a splice, you have a loss. And what I mean by a splice is you can have 2 connectors, one female, one male. You join them together. It's like a barrel connector that becomes an impedance bump. It becomes a loss, not so much at the HF world, but more in the higher frequencies in VHF, UHF. It can add up and become an issue. In your case of your LMR 400, your jumpers, if I wouldn't use it on a tower in a beam-in situation, but inside your shack where it's just going to be, it's not going to be flexing around because LMR 400 has a solid conductor, center conductor. Perfect. Just set it and forget it, and you're good to go. You got to think about the application and where this piece of cable is going to be used is how what cable you're going to use. So to kind of wrap it up, we got all different kinds of cables to come from. The biggest thing for us always is going to be the dollars. We're always thinking of how much it's going to cost. I recommend look at when you get a new station set up, invest in brand new coax, because then you get coax from your buddy or from the flea market or whatever. You don't know
why it's out there.
You don't know. Oh yeah, I've used this in my situation. I've tested it. Well, did you really test it? How did you test it?
Right.
When you put something in brand new, you know what it is from the beginning. You can kind of, if you're really anal about it, and you can document it, the date you put it in, you can put a little tag on it, what year. Some cable will have the date it was manufactured, which is great, but not all of them. And you can go from there, and they'll just look at your application. And then after 5, 6, 10 years, whatever, maybe think about replacing it. Or when you upgrade your station, anytime you do a major upgrade, hey, I got a new radio. Let's put in a new piece of cable.
Sorry, go ahead. I was going to say you could schedule your change outs with your colonoscopies.
There you go.
See that? I knew it was going to make it in.
Yep. There you go.
People are thanking you for your presentation today.
And then
go ahead.
And then if you don't have, and then there's the connector. If you don't have the tools or the knowledge or the skill set, you're a little iffy on making up cables. You got companies like ABR, and they make pre-made cables. There's other companies out there that make pre-made cables, and you can just order 100-foot cable. And ABR will put on whatever connectors you want, and they can even personalize it for you. Just like Brian got a personalized cable. Cool. And think about it. If you order some cables and it's already personalized, if you go out into a club setting and you set up field day, your cable's already identified. So you know how to retrieve your cable, and when everything is all set up. So it'll cost a little bit more, but hey, it's worth it. It's done professionally. And there you go. All you have to do is worry about put it in service, seal up your outside connection, and you're good to go. And
my takeaways is that we put a lot of money into our antenna systems and our radios. Some people just put a lot of money into the radios and not even the antennas, which is a different, into the care of the antenna. But the coax is also sometimes the odd man out, if you will pardon the expression. We overlook that. Time. And it's not the cheapest thing. So we need to maybe take care of it a little better. Keep an eye on when we put it in and what your goals are with it. Tape it up. And people are giving you love for your presentation on coax today. And I can say the beauty about Steve is this is just one facet of his understanding. This is why he gets so many texts from your boy and just asking the most mundane questions sometimes.
Oh, keeps me on my toes. It's like, okay, I'm going to see if I'm going to give the right information. So
he may change when he changes his phone number. That's the day that I'm like, I knew I went to the well too many times. But we can do this conversation with antennas. We can talk about antenna analyzers. This is his world. He's been doing it for over 40 years, and that's my main Elmer right here. So I'm glad that we can bring this to you. Thank you, Steve, for sharing it in public forum, and people have responded well to it. I hope you found some value in this presentation, if you'd call it that. It's more of just a conversation, and you can join that conversation if there's something that and here's where I am. If you just have those questions you think maybe I wouldn't even ask that publicly, I would. So drop it to me and I'll ask on your behalf if you feel that way.
Or email me. Yeah, just
drop an email.
Drop me a line, w7udi@arrl.net. If you can't remember it, just look me up on QRZ and the email's right there. If you have a question, I'll answer it as best I can. If I don't know, I'll tell you I don't know, and
we'll find it. We'll go look.
We'll go look and try to research it. But it's in a nutshell. Don't overlook your cable. Don't overlook your coax. It's we put a great investment in our radio. We put a great investment in our antenna systems at time, but we overlook I think one of the most important pieces of of our setup is the transmission of that RF from the radio to the antenna, and from the antenna back to the radio. And
what we're going to talk about next time. This is exciting. Heliax.
Yeah, we can talk about heliax, or we can talk about weatherproofing. I can maybe show different pieces. It's like, what's this butyl tape? It's like, what is it? What's this Scotch 23 tape? And
KC3AZT asked, are you taking notes? Christian's always, I don't think you can see it, but yeah, Christian's always, I think I spelled butyl wrong, but you bet I'm taking notes.
If you want to know like butyl is coax seal. You've seen that some of the vendors will sell a little product called coax seal, and that's butyl. It's this rubbery stick. Once it touches itself, it sticks. It won't come apart. but it's great for water intrusion. We use it a lot. We call it AquaSeal. So because we use it for in the utility world, we use a lot of it for splices in vaults, and it sometimes vaults fill up with water, and 12,500 volts is not a good combination. So we got to keep it sealed up.
Well, thank you, Steve. And thank you to everybody who dropped by today and anybody who'll be listening to this later on. We appreciate you. Go to YouTube, subscribe, and click the bell. That way you get your notifications. We've locked into Saturday mornings, 10 o'clock Central Time. We do have a net tomorrow night, Sundays at 7 o'clock Central. Use Central just because that's where I am, and it's in the middle of the country.
We got to pick a time zone.
Be there. Yeah, we got to pick a time zone. We can talk.
And it's always the East Coast gets the love, or the West Coast, and the Central doesn't get any love there.
Stay in the heartland with it. I think we'll have Ian back November Victor 4. Charlie will be joining us from Atlanta area. Steve will be there. I'm going to try to drop by too. Are we running on 40 meters this week?
Yep, 20 is pretty well getting. We're doing in the time change, so let's just stick with 40, and it simplifies it, and everybody just remember one band.
Yeah, 40 meters now as we get deeper into the fall and the winter. So we'll see you there. Check in. We'll post up on our Facebook group, our frequencies on the Twitter page, and we talked about YouTube. Thank you, guys. QRO to the people, and we'll catch you again next week. 73, everybody.
To join the 100 Watts in a Wire community, visit 100wattsinawire.com.